I carried on my research when I was doing my PhD, where I explored challenges faced by international students, and this focused on postgraduate students at the institution I was at. As an insider researcher, my experience in participation was very exciting. It was stimulating, absorbing, and evoking as I became integral to what was understudied. Overall, the lived experiences taught by international students left me with an introspective and empathetic understanding of the nature of challenges faced by international students. My experience in collecting data was simplified uh, as the participants developed a passion for the study because they really grabbed the opportunity of sharing experiences, their challenges when they were doing their studies. Additionally, I felt valued as an international student, knowing that as part of this study, my contributions would go a long way in influencing policy and practice in my institution.
When I conducted my research with international students, it was as if I was the one who is also undergoing a study, because most of the things that I would ask them was like, what do you do during the day? Like, what's your routine? And then they would tell me, oh, I'd be waking up, bringing the kids to school, then I'd go home, I'd fix lunch and things like that. So I could relate with them a lot. And as both the person who was conducting the study and the person who was also being studied, I became very reflective of the whole process. I just felt, because during that time, especially when I was doing the master's, I was really in pain. So I could relate to how difficult it was, like being away, especially with the moms that I spoke with, because a lot of them are parents. And I would really spend time with them and talk to them, and they got to become my friends. And until now, I am in touch with them, like in Facebook. So the reflection that I get from that is that there's a part of being a student that's also not being a student. So oftentimes we think about student as with someone with a student number or who goes to university, but we neglect that part where they're people with holistic lives. And whenever I spoke with them, in that study, I highlighted the fact, and until now, I highlight the fact that these are people with families, and we mustn't forget that. So, the kids always came into play. I have one child, and whenever I spoke with them, they'd be opening up more when I speak about family life. So I just thought I was a bit very like too talkative whenever I was with them, because I felt like, hey, it's my time to have somebody who can relate to what I'm actually experiencing, speak to me about what they're experiencing. So it would be great to find out, but at the same time, it would be great if they also knew about what I was experiencing, because I had the assumption that they'd be delighted to also hear my own story. And sure enough, yeah, they did welcome some of the things that I shared with them.
Right. So I will share two of the pretty recent research that I have participated in someone else's program. So during my PhD, I have participated in two research whose aim is to uncover some aspects of international students. And so the first one is the one doing by one of my friends, that she is conducting this research on how international students perceive their surroundings. Like, I don't know if I can explain it clearly or accurately. So it's about the green space surrounded them, and how do they interact? How do international students like us interact with such green space, such surroundings, and how does that form a part of our holistic experience studying abroad? So about this research, I think it's quite I don't know. I do feel like they're the researchers are treating us like quite equally and respectfully, because she's using this quite creative idea. Like, it's not just interview, not just talking, but also she would invite us to to compose some kind of a visual diary. Like, we can take photos, we during our daily lives, we can comment on what that photo says about our experience. So although I think it's a quite tedious process, it quite requires some commitment, that we need to take photos every day and to upload. Well, it's kind of it requires quite a commitment, I guess. But I think the results is that I feel like I do feel my voice has been valued. I do feel like so this visual experience do matter to her project. I am contributing. I'm actively contributing, but not just being objectifying or anything. So I do think this is such a quite a positive experience in research with international students. So the other one I have participated is this researcher is particularly looking at female international students' experience. So how are we experiencing as a female in abroad, and also comparing to our domestic country. So I think this research is also quite a positive experience to me, because the researcher, she invited us to talk about give some examples of how we experience as a female perspective. So I think I have give those two all positive experiences to me, and I think the reason I feel that they are all research with international students, because they themselves are also international students. So I think in this process, we can create this empathy and some shared understanding among each other. So I think this is really something to do with the researcher's own background, and how we trust them as a fellow international student that can really make sense of our narratives.
So my first project with international students, my colleague and I, we decided to use photo elicitation interviews to let students talk about their first semester experience on campus, and also like in a new city they just settled in. And the purpose to use photo was to let them talk freely, and also outside of what we as researcher would set a boundary, or what we would imagine in the beginning that student might think what's important to them, and therefore to use a visual, we let them take photos of what is home to them, and also who they are, and also where is their favorite places on campus or in the city that do what. So it kind of let them decide how to tell the stories, and also how to present their life as an international student. So that's the project I did first. And now we are planning the second project with international students, also with visual, but this time we are going to try a photo voice project. So we will decide the topic of the photo together with international students. So it would be more participatory action research wise. And this way, together with the the discussion and also discussion method that inspired by Paulo Freire, we hope this research will not only find out their experience, but also to form a community among these participants, and then to let them talk about experience, to reflect on the racialized experience they have had during their study here, and also to see if the awaken of consciousness would be possible through the process of our project.
So I use a quant data. It means when I work on the data set, I have little opportunities to really face international students in person, different from interviews or other qualitative studies. So navigated by the critical quant approach, my research particularly examines the diversity within international students, because in the US higher education research context, often international students are categorized as one homogeneous group. So by using the quant data, I try to hear the voice of the diverse international students. For example, one of my studies used the latent cluster analysis with the multi-institutional datasets. So I examined the typology of academic engagement within Asian American international students. And my studies found the statistical evidence of those different engagement patterns among those students. In other words, my research shows statistical evidence to illustrate how international students have a diversity within the group, right? My research challenged those tendency of considering international students as just one group of students. Such accurate understanding of international students is critical for educational researchers or staff members to understand those international student experiences and build the effective educational practices based on their differences.
So as I have mentioned, during my PhD days, I conducted my first research. I'm a qualitative researcher. I don't believe in quantitative because I cannot capture the voices of my research participants. So it all started off when I was doing my PhD studies. I did explore the academic success. What is academic success for postgraduate international students back home in Malaysia? At that point of time, why Malaysia? Because international students were attracted massively by Malaysian government in 2011 onwards. And I wanted to go back home after my PhD. But I got married during my PhD studies, and then I choose to stay on in Australia. But that was my first time conducting research with international students. I guess I didn't stumble upon any bizarre moment or having any difficulties because I was one of them. So the way I would refrain or to have that email going out to them saying that I am an international student, I am conducting research with international student on this topic. And I guess that just broke that barrier that with my research participant and myself, because we could, how to say, gel immediately, because there was no, we were all on the level playing field. And then after that,
after finishing my PhD, I start in Australia, an Australian classroom in the university. We've got a lot of international students. So my questions always the same. Why are you coming here? Why are you going to stay back in Australia, or are you going home? So for several years, they always say, no, we want to stay in Australia. It's a land of opportunity, so on and so forth. But the last 10 years or so, international students were saying that they want to go back home. That triggered my brain, and especially Chinese international students. We have got about 20% of international student market share of Australian international students. So I went from international student, then I started focusing on international graduates. I started off with Chinese international graduates, looking into their employability, looking into their employment outcomes. And it triggered me, why are you going back home? So I went to China twice to interview international graduates from Australia. The second time I went to China is to interview international students in China. And again, there was no barrier because I introduced myself as a former international student. Now I'm an international academic, and it just broke that barrier of who is she, why she wants to know, but she's not one of us, so on. So I think that really helped me in navigating my research with international students.
Yeah, so maybe a bit of background about my PhD project. Yeah, so I'm exploring knowledge legitimacy and the role of international student mobility in the production or reproduction of global hierarchies. And my project is a cross-national study between the UK, Denmark, and Germany. And it's anchored in ethnographic fieldwork. And so I follow international degree students from 2 master cohorts in each country. And so it's around 11 months of fieldwork in total. And yeah, so I do participant observation on and off campus, and then I use also different qualitative methods. And yeah, as I just said, I think doing research with international students is very much about the methods we use. And so when designing my project, I try to decide on creative participatory methods. And yeah, so I've chosen 2 specific interview approaches, and also I'm offering a creative workshop.